I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't going through her phone looking for something to be angry about. She had asked me that morning, over coffee, to find the reservation confirmation for dinner that Saturday. The restaurant name, the time, the address. That's it. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, unlocked, face up. I picked it up. The Messages app was already open. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the coffee to go cold. Long enough to read the thread twice, maybe 3 times, just to make sure I was understanding what I was looking at. There was a message near the top of the thread. It said, "We need to figure out what we're going to do about the baby." A few lines down, "Don't tell him yet. Let us figure out the right way." I put the phone down exactly where I found it. I didn't say anything. I didn't call anyone. I just stood in my own kitchen, in the house my grandfather had left me, and I let the silence do what it always does, which is tell you the truth when no one else will. I looked at the name at the top of that thread for a long time. It wasn't a stranger. It was my brother's name. My name is Ryan. And let me tell you what my life looked like before that night. My wife, Megan, and I had been married for 6 years. We lived in the house my grandfather left me, a 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, no mortgage. The title was in my name only. It had transferred that way through his estate, and at the time I treated it like a technicality. Just a legal formality from paperwork I'd handled years ago and never thought about it again. I never thought about whose name was on that deed. It felt like a formality. It wasn't. Megan and I had a joint checking account. I was the primary earner. I put in around $4,000 a month, consistently, for years. She worked part-time, on and off, contributing a few hundred here and there when she could. I didn't keep score. That's not the kind of husband I wanted to be. What I earned was ours. What we had was shared. That's what I believed marriage meant. We weren't a perfect couple. No one is. But I thought we were solid. I thought we had built something real together, something worth protecting. That's the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't lived it. Not the betrayal itself, but how completely ordinary everything looked the morning before you find out. Now let me tell you about my brother, Derek. He's 3 years younger than me. Growing up, Derek was charming in a way that got him out of things, the kind of charm that other people end up paying for eventually. When he was 26, Derek ran into money trouble. He kept the details vague on purpose, the way he always did. What I know is that my parents transferred him $15,000, quietly, no repayment plan, no terms discussed. I found out 3 months later, by accident. When I brought it up to my mother, not even angrily, just mentioning it, she looked at me with this practiced patience and said, "You've always been the strong one. He needs more support than you do." I was 28. I nodded and let it go. I had been letting things go for a long time by then. And looking back now, that $15,000 wasn't an isolated moment. It was a pattern. A way the family had quietly agreed to operate, where Derek's mistakes got absorbed and mine got managed around. I was the strong one. I just didn't know yet what that was going to cost me. Megan came home about 20 minutes after I put the phone down. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The coffee was still there, cold. I hadn't moved it. She walked in, set her bag down, and started talking about something, dinner, I think, or something she'd seen at the store. I don't remember. I wasn't listening. I waited until she stopped. Then I asked her one question. "How long?" She knew exactly what I meant. I could tell by the way she went still. 4 months, she said. 4 months. And she was 14 weeks pregnant. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I just sat there and let her talk, because that's what she needed to do, fill the silence with explanations that weren't really explanations. She said she felt alone. She said she didn't know how to talk to me. She said it wasn't something she planned. She said a lot of things that were about her feelings, and none of them were about what she had actually done. I let her finish. Then she said something that shifted everything. She said my parents already knew. She said they had known for 2 weeks. She said they were all trying to figure out the best way to tell me. I didn't respond. I went to the bedroom and I lay down in the dark and I stared at the ceiling. After a while, I picked up my own phone and opened my call history. No missed calls from my mother. No missed calls from my father. Nothing from Derek. For 2 full weeks, while they all sat with this information, while they met and talked and made plans around it, not one of them had picked up the phone. Not to warn me. Not to check on me. Not even to say they were sorry for what was coming. Nobody called me. For 2 weeks, they all knew, and not one of them picked up the phone. 3 days passed. I didn't call anyone. I went to work. I came home. I slept on the couch without explaining why, and Megan didn't ask. We moved around each other in that house like 2 people who had already accepted something that hadn't been said out loud yet. Then my mother called. Not to apologize. Not to ask how I was doing. She called to invite me to Sunday dinner. Her exact words were, Come over this weekend. We need to talk as a family. I went. I shouldn't have expected anything different. But I went. When I pulled up to my parents' house that Sunday afternoon, I noticed Derek's car in the driveway. I also noticed that a car I recognized Megan's was not there anymore. There was a faint warmth on the hood of Derek's car when I walked past it. He hadn't been there long. I walked inside. The table was set. There was food. My father was in his chair at the head of the table, the way he always sat when something important was about to be decided. Derek was on the couch, hands clasped, looking at the floor with the expression of a man practicing humility he didn't actually feel. Nobody said I'm sorry when I walked in. My mother asked if I wanted coffee. The conversation that followed was not about what had happened to me, it was about the baby. About stability. About what it meant to keep the family together, their words, not mine. My father laid it out calmly, the way he always did when he'd already made a decision, and was explaining it to you, as though it were still a discussion. The plan, as far as I could tell, was this: the baby was coming. Derek was the father. Megan was still my wife, technically. And the family needed everyone to find a way to move forward. My role in this plan was not discussed. I was expected to absorb it. That was assumed. At one point my father looked at me directly. He said, "We just want what's best for everyone." He never once said my name. I stayed for 11 minutes after that. I know because I checked my phone when I stood up to leave. My mother followed me to the front door. She touched my arm and spoke quietly, the way she did when she wanted something to feel like comfort and it wasn't. She said Derek had made a mistake. She said he needed the family right now. She said the baby didn't choose any of this. And then she said the thing she always said, the thing she had been saying my entire life whenever she needed me to stand down. "You've always been the strong one. You can get through this." No apology. No acknowledgement of what had been done to me. Just the familiar weight of being told my pain was manageable because I was built to manage it. I asked her one question: what about what was done to me? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "If you push this, you're going to tear this family apart." I nodded. I walked to my car. I drove home and I didn't say a word to anyone. But I sat in the driveway for a while before I went inside. I kept thinking about that sentence. You're going to tear this family apart. Not Derek. Not Megan. Me. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. Megan didn't leave. She didn't offer to leave. She stayed in the house, our house, my grandfather's house, and we existed in it together in a way that had no name I could find. She cooked sometimes. She watched television. She slept in our bed and I slept on the couch, and neither of us said anything about the arrangement because talking about it would have required acknowledging what it meant. Derek called me twice during those 2 weeks. Both times he opened with "I just want to talk," as brothers. Both times he steered around the actual thing, the affair, the pregnancy, the 4 months of lies, and aimed instead at the future. What things could look like. How the family could stay close. He used the word healing once, which I found remarkable given that he was the one who had caused the wound. I didn't respond with anger. I let him talk. Then I said I needed more time, and I ended the call. My father called once. He kept it brief. He said, "Son, don't do something you'll regret. Think about the family. Not, think about yourself. Not, I'm sorry this happened to you. Think about the family." Meanwhile, the joint account was moving. I had set up transaction alerts on my phone, something I'd done years ago and mostly ignored. Now I was watching them. In the 11 days following the Sunday meeting, $2,400 left that account. $800 in retail purchases. $600 at a hotel in a city 40 minutes away. I could see the name of the hotel in the transaction description. And then $1,000 transferred out to an external account I didn't recognize. An account number I had never seen before. I wrote that number down. Megan was still sleeping in our bed. And money was leaving the joint account every few days. That was the situation. That was what everyone expected me to maintain. A few days after that, Megan came to find me in the kitchen. She stood in the doorway and told me she was keeping the baby. Not as a question. Not as something she wanted to discuss. She said it the way you say something that has already been decided, flat, final, delivered. Then she waited for me to respond. I asked her one question: what does that mean for us? She said, "I don't know yet." That was it. That was the full answer. She didn't know yet. Megan was keeping another man's baby in my house, sleeping in my bed, drawing money from our joint account, and she didn't know yet what that meant for the marriage she was still technically in. That evening, Derek texted me. The message said, "I know this is hard. I want to be there for the baby. I hope we can figure this out as a family." No apology. Not a single word acknowledging what he had done to me. Just future planning. Just the assumption that I would remain in the structure, the house, the account, the arrangement while they built something new inside it. Derek wanted to figure it out. I had already started figuring it out. Just not the way any of them expected. That weekend, I didn't go anywhere. I told no one what I was doing. I didn't announce a plan. I just went to the filing cabinet in the second bedroom, the one we never used for anything important, and I started pulling documents. Marriage certificate. 3 years of joint bank statements. My pay stubs going back 36 months. Every utility bill, every maintenance receipt, every household expense I could find a paper trail for. I stacked them on the dining room table in the order. I pulled them and I started going through them one by one. The numbers told a story the family never bothered to look at. Over 36 months, I had put an average of $4,200 a month into that joint account. Megan had contributed somewhere between $600 and $800 a month, inconsistently some months nothing at all. The household ran on approximately $2,100 a month. Utilities, groceries, repairs, insurance, mortgage-free, because the house was mine. I had covered roughly 85% of everything we spent together, for 3 years, without once asking her to account for it. I put all of it into a manila folder. By midnight I had a folder and a plan. The next morning I went online and looked up the county recorder's office. I typed in the property address. I typed in my name. The deed came up exactly as I remembered it, my name only, transferred from my grandfather's estate, no joint title modification ever recorded. No co-ownership. No survivorship clause. Just my name, clean and sole, the way it had been since the day the estate closed. I printed it. I added it to the folder. Then I called a real estate attorney whose name I found through a colleague. I paid $150 for a 30-minute consultation. I described the situation, the marriage, the inherited property, the sole title, the divorce I was beginning to consider. I asked him what the deed meant in practical terms. He was direct. He said that in most circumstances, an inherited property, titled solely in one spouse's name, carries strong protection in divorce proceedings, particularly when no joint title modification has been filed and no shared equity agreement exists. He said the key variable was time and residential pattern. The longer a non-titled spouse remains in exclusive residence and can demonstrate financial contribution, the more complex the argument becomes. Then he paused. He said, "If you're going to move, you should move soon." I thanked him, ended the call, and added his notes to the folder. That evening I went back to the bank statements. I already had the account number I'd written down from the transaction alerts, the external transfer, $1,000, destination unknown. Now I cross-referenced it against everything else. I pulled up 3 months of statements and went through them line by line. What I found was not complicated. It was just invisible until you looked. The $800 in retail purchases. The $600 hotel charge, the hotel 40 minutes away. On a weekend Megan had told me she was visiting a friend. And the $1,000 transfers, not once, but twice in the past 90 days, to the same external account, $2,000 total, moved out quietly, to a place I had no visibility into. I searched the account number format against what I knew about the bank Megan used before we married. It matched. There was a personal account in her name that predated our marriage, that she had never mentioned, and that had been receiving transfers from our joint account for at least 3 months. I added everything to the folder. I closed it. I set it on the kitchen table next to my coffee and I looked at it for a long time. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. 2 weeks after the Sunday meeting at my parents' house, I called the family law attorney. I had found her name through a colleague at work, someone who had been through a divorce 2 years earlier and spoke about his attorney, the way people speak about a doctor who caught something serious before it became fatal. I didn't tell him why I was asking. I just wrote the name down. Her office was downtown, 14th floor, glass and gray carpet and a view of the city that made everything below look very small and very manageable. I brought the manila folder. I sat across from her and I put it on her desk and I said, "Tell me what I'm working with." She went through it methodically. The deed. The 36 months of bank statements. The contribution breakdown. The undisclosed account. The transaction records. She asked a few questions. How long had Megan been in residence? Had there been any joint renovation work done on the property? Was there a prenuptial agreement? No, and no. The consultation ran 2 hours. The fee was $400. When she finished reviewing the folder, she set it down and looked at me directly. She said the picture was cleaner than most cases she handled. The inherited sole titled property was my strongest position. The financial contribution record supported a significant imbalance argument. The undisclosed account would need to be disclosed in discovery. That was not optional. That was procedure. The no-fault divorce filing was straightforward given the circumstances. Then she walked me through the timeline. File the divorce first. Simultaneously, as sole property owner, issue a formal notice to vacate, a separate legal process, handled in parallel, giving a standard 30-day window to vacate the premises. Her office would handle all communication with the other party from the point of filing forward. I would not need to be present for service. I would not need to confront anyone directly. She said, "If you're ready, this is a clean case." I told her I needed a few days to think. I drove home from that meeting and I did not go inside. I sat in the car in the driveway, engine off, and I did the math. 6 more months of doing nothing, of letting the situation sit, while the family found its footing, while Megan remained in residence, while Derek planned his future from a comfortable distance, would cost me more than I had let myself calculate until that moment. Financially, approximately $2,100 a month in shared household costs. Continuing to run through the joint account, $12,600 over 6 months, flowing out of a structure that was already bleeding. Legally, every additional month, Megan remained in that house, strengthened an argument I did not want her to be able to make. Exclusive residential use. Financial contribution to the household. The longer the pattern continued, the harder it would be to call it what it actually was: a temporary arrangement in a property that was never hers. And there was one more thing. Derek's baby was going to be born in approximately 5 months. If I did nothing, that child would come home from the hospital to my grandfather's house. The house my grandfather built with his own hands, left to me specifically, titled in my name and no one else's. That would be the reality I had allowed. Not because it happened to me, but because I had chosen to absorb it, the way I had always absorbed things, because I was the strong one and strong ones were expected to manage. I thought about my mother's voice at the front door. "You've always been the strong one." I thought about my father at the head of that table. "We just want what's best for everyone." I thought about Derek's text. "I hope we can figure this out as a family." I sat in that car for 22 minutes. Then I called the attorney. I said, "Let's file everything." She said, "I'll have the paperwork ready by Thursday." I hung up. I sat there for another minute in the quiet, not because I was second-guessing myself, because I was saying goodbye to the version of this that could have been different, to the family I had believed in, to the marriage I had tried to build. Then I got out of the car and went inside. The silence in that house had a different quality after that phone call. It wasn't the silence of waiting anymore. It was the silence of someone who had already decided. Thursday came. I drove to the attorney's office before work. The lobby was empty that early, just the receptionist and the low hum of the ventilation system and the particular quiet of a building that handles other people's worst days for a living. I signed the paperwork at a small conference table. My attorney reviewed each page with me before I put pen to it. No fault divorce filing. Notice to vacate for the property. Discovery request, including disclosure of all financial accounts, held individually or jointly. I signed everything. The filing fee was $435. I paid it by card. The case number was assigned that same morning. My attorney said the process server would handle delivery within 5 to 7 business days. I would not be present. I would not be involved. That was the point. Everything from this moment forward would move through proper channels, not through me. I was home by 9:30. Megan was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked up and said good morning. I said good morning back. I made coffee. I went to the second bedroom and I sat at the desk and I opened my laptop and I worked through the rest of the morning like it was any other day. She didn't know yet. The family didn't know yet. For a few more days, I had that. The process server delivered both documents on the same Thursday. The divorce papers and the notice to vacate arrived together, 2 separate envelopes, certified, delivered to the front door of my grandfather's house by a third party I had never met and would never need to meet. I was not there when it happened. I had gone into the office that day deliberately, for exactly that reason. My attorney called me at 11:47 in the morning to confirm delivery. I said, "Thank you." That was all. 40 minutes later my phone rang. Megan's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. 2 more times before noon. That evening she left a message. I could hear in her voice the specific register of someone who has just understood that the ground has shifted and they don't yet know how far. She said she needed to talk. She said this wasn't fair. She said she had nowhere to go. I listened to the voicemail once. Then I forwarded it to my attorney's office and saved a copy to the case file folder on my laptop. I did not call back. The following Monday I opened a new checking account at a bank I had never used before. I redirected my direct deposit that same afternoon. The new account was in my name only. No joint access. No shared visibility. Clean. Under the no-fault divorce filing, an automatic temporary restraining order had been placed on marital assets, standard procedure in my state, not antagonistic, not a tactical move. It simply meant that neither party could liquidate, transfer, or significantly alter shared financial holdings while the case was active. The joint account was frozen for the duration of proceedings. The undisclosed account was now on the discovery list. Megan would be required to disclose it in full. That was not my decision. That was procedure. 3 days later, my attorney received a call from Megan's attorney. That was when I knew she had finally understood what was happening. That was also when my parents called. Over the 2 weeks that followed, my phone registered 24 incoming calls. 11 from Megan. 8 from my mother, 4 from Derek, 1 from my father. My attorney handled anything that required a response. Everything else went to voicemail. My mother's messages escalated, measured at first, then sharper, then silent. Derek's 4 calls were variations on the same theme, man to man, as brothers. My father called once and left one message. It said, "You're destroying this family." The same sentence my mother had used at the front door 3 weeks earlier. I saved it to the case file. Not out of anger. Out of accuracy. 24 calls, 0 responses, not one of them began with the words "I'm sorry for what we did to you." The silence on my end was not cruelty. It was the only honest thing left between us. Megan vacated the property within the 30-day window. She didn't fight it. There was nothing to fight with, no claim on the deed, no equity argument that could survive the contribution records. She packed what was hers and she left. I wasn't home when it happened. I had arranged it that way. She moved into Derek's apartment. 1 bedroom, $1,400 a month, a place he had already been struggling to afford before any of this started. I knew this not because anyone told me, but because that's what happens when 2 people finally have to live inside the choices they made. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. In discovery, the undisclosed account was disclosed in full, $9,200. The financial settlement reflected the contribution records from the past 3 years. Which is to say, it reflected the truth. The social fallout spread on its own. Mutual friends, neighbors, extended family, they all heard different versions eventually, and they drew their own conclusions. I didn't manage it. I didn't need to. My parents still have Sunday dinners. I'm told the table is smaller now. If any part of this felt familiar, if you know what it means to be the last one told and the first one expected to absorb it, stay with me for one more minute. I still live in the house my grandfather left me. The first thing I did after Megan left was repaint the kitchen, a gray beige called Elephant's Breath. It took a Saturday afternoon and it was the most peaceful 4 hours I'd had in months. That night I slept in my own bed. The next morning was a Tuesday. 1 cup of coffee. The new walls. Nothing to manage and no one to answer to. I'm not going to tell you the family came around. They didn't. I'm not going to tell you. Derek apologized. He hasn't. What I'll tell you is this. They chose each other. That was their right. I didn't tear the family apart. I just stopped holding it together. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more, I'll be here.